Of all the things Jesus ever said, there's one statement that just stops you in your tracks. It's provocative, it's intense, and it has sparked literally centuries of debate. He said, "Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you." So, what on earth did he mean? Today, we're going to put on our detective hats and really dig into this mystery.
And there it is. This is the line at the very heart of our investigation. I mean, let's just be honest for a second. That sounds pretty shocking, right? It's graphic. And he's not just making a suggestion, he's tying it to the very concept of having eternal life. You can just imagine the total confusion that must have spread through the crowd when they heard that.
So as you can imagine, that one statement created two major paths of thought over the years. On one side, you've got the literal view, the idea that during communion, the bread and wine actually, physically, become the body and blood of Christ. And on the other side, you've got this symbolic view, that they are incredibly powerful symbols that represent his body and blood. This has been the central debate for ages. But what if the answer isn't buried in 2,000 years of theological debate? What if the key to solving this whole thing is hiding right there in the text itself?
It turns out the first clue is a brilliant parallel that Jesus himself sets up. So, check this out. In the very same conversation, Jesus makes a pretty straightforward statement. He says that eternal life comes to everyone who believes in him. Okay, makes sense, right? We've heard that before. But then, just a few moments later, he says that eternal life comes to whoever feeds on his flesh and drinks his blood. Wait a minute. Are you seeing it? He's just described two totally different actions, believing on one hand and eating on the other, and he says they both lead to the exact same result, eternal life. And that right there is our key. Jesus is using the intense physical act of eating as a powerful metaphor for the spiritual act of believing. To eat his flesh means to personally accept, to internalize, and to fully trust in his sacrifice.
And if you look closer, this is totally his MO. This is classic Jesus. He constantly used physical metaphors to explain deep spiritual truths, and time again, people would get tripped up by taking him too literally. Remember when he talked about destroying the temple and raising it in 3 days? Everyone immediately thought of the massive stone building in Jerusalem, but he was talking about his own body. Or when he told a religious leader he had to be born again, and the guy was genuinely confused, asking how he could literally go back into his mother's womb. This eat my flesh line fits that pattern perfectly.
Okay, so, great. We've established it's a metaphor. But that just leads to the next big question, doesn't it? Of all the metaphors in the world, why a meal? Why this very specific kind of graphic imagery of eating and drinking?
Well, the answer isn't just about the words he chose, it's about when he chose to say them. The context, the timing of this whole conversation, that's everything. And that brings us to our next major clue. See, Jesus gives this whole speech right around the time of Passover, and that is absolutely not a coincidence. Passover was the single most important memorial feast in Jewish culture, and it was built entirely around one powerful idea: remembrance. The entire reason the feast existed was to remember God's incredible, history-changing rescue of Israel from slavery back in Egypt. It was never just about a lamb and some herbs. It was about remembering a mighty act of salvation. And the book of Exodus makes this crystal clear. The command is so direct. This day shall be for you a memorial day. Remember this day. The whole meal was designed to make people actively remember God's deliverance. So picture the scene. In the middle of this ancient, sacred tradition, a feast all about remembering, Jesus does something absolutely radical. He takes this powerful idea of remembrance and launches a new Passover, completely recentering the whole thing around himself. And the best part is, he tells us exactly why he's doing it. He says, point blank, do this in remembrance of me. He's taking that ancient command to remember a past salvation, and he's redirecting it. He's saying, from now on, I am the saving work you need to remember. Now, we have to pause on that word remembrance, because for us, it's usually a pretty passive thing, right? Like remembering a fact for a test. But in the Bible, remembrance is active. It's vibrant. It's about participation. It's about taking a huge, world-changing event from the past and pulling its power and its reality into your life right now. So let's tie all these clues together. Let's get to the verdict. What Jesus is doing here is just monumental. He's taking the most powerful act of remembrance his people have ever known, and he's reframing it completely around his own coming sacrifice on the cross. Let's just lay it out side by side. You have the Old Passover, a meal to remember being delivered from slavery in Egypt. And now Jesus gives us the new Passover, a meal to remember being delivered from sin through him. The connection is just undeniable. Both of God's greatest acts of salvation are designed to be remembered through a powerful, symbolic meal. So here's the bottom line. To eat his flesh isn't about a literal physical act. It's so much deeper than that. It is the ultimate symbolic act of actively remembering, of trusting in, and of participating in his sacrifice, the new Passover that brings true freedom. I love how one writer described this. They said that taking part in this simple meal is like making a confession of faith without words. You are telling the entire story of salvation, of hope, of deliverance, without having to say a single thing. You know, we started this whole thing with a really controversial phrase about eating, but we've ended up with this incredibly profound idea of memory itself. It's not just about history, it's about bringing the power of a past event into our present. So, the question I want to leave you with is this: what does it truly mean for you to remember?